Guillermo Mash for the January 4th, 2017 Without a Roof radio program. And we are blessed to have, wrapping the show this week, Bob Erlenbusch, Executive Director of the Sacramento Regional Coalition to End Homelessness. And he's also the current board president of the National Coalition to End Homelessness. So welcome to KZFR People Power Radio, Bob Erlenbusch.
Thank you for the invite.
I know you and I had a wonderful Solutions to Homelessness recording from the summer, and you had said this thing that just stuck with me. If I'd known when I started doing this work in the early 80s, if we'd still be talking about housing 40 years later. Give me some feedback on that comment. I loved it.
As I was saying, I started working on homeless issues in November of 1984. And that was, we were one of the first healthcare for the homeless projects in the nation. And here I am 33 years later, still talking about almost exactly all the same issues: lack of affordable housing, lack of mental health care and substance abuse programs, as well as, continuing to advocate to protect the civil rights of homeless people. I mean, ironically, in 3 decades, government officials have increased the criminalization of homeless people, of people experiencing homelessness, rather than counter to the Obama's Justice Administration's admonitions to stop criminalizing people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, and I've done this on air many times, Bob, and I know you and I know this. Anyone that's worked this issue knows that we had Richard Marbit came through. He's a nationally known consultant, and then Lloyd Pendleton. But both of those folks said criminalization doesn't help stop. So we've got to get that message out loud and clear.
As it relates to the question of lack of affordable housing, what criminalization does is create barriers to the very housing that we're trying to advocate for, and also creates barriers for employment. And for young people, if you go to jail, it makes it nearly impossible for a young person applying to college to get student aid. So criminalizing homeless people does exacerbate, the problem, the crisis of homelessness in our country. Not only for adults, but for homeless youth as well.
Let's just land on the prompt question of why are we still so desperately short affordable and accessible housing, Bob Erlenbusch, Sacramento, California?
Well, if you just take Sacramento, just for example, a city and a county affordable housing trust fund since 1989. But it only has $5 million in it, and that's due to, it only has one source of funding, which is commercial linkage fee. So in a down economy, when, office buildings and hospitals, et cetera, aren't being built, there's no money going into the trust fund. So many communities around the country are starting to realize, like Los Angeles did 10 years ago, but more recently, Washington, D.C. passed, after years of organizing, passed a $100 million housing trust fund. We can't rely on the feds to put the resources necessary into creating affordable housing through the National Housing Trust Fund. So many communities are starting to address the crisis on their own. So we need to have affordable housing trust funds around this country to address the housing crisis. And Sacramento is a microcosm of other communities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Denver, just to name a few, and then of course New York and Boston, that we have only a 2 to 3% vacancy rate in apartment rentals. So we have done in our community, about 5,000 interviews. They call them vulnerability indexes to try to figure out who's the most vulnerable out on the streets. Be that as it may, our continuum of care has only been able to place 5% of those people into affordable housing. So that's just a microcosm of the affordable housing crisis around the country. Look at San Francisco. 75% of their people experiencing homelessness are outside because of the lack of shelter and lack of affordable housing.
Any closing comments for our listening audience here in Northern California?
2017 should be a real wake-up call for advocates across the country around social justice issues. But, we've got an incoming Ben Carson, who's going to be Secretary of HUD. We need to hold the line and educate him and organize around the issue of lack of affordable housing and galvanize the political will around the country to end and prevent homelessness.
Well, I look forward to working with you and others on that, Bob Erlenbusch, and I'm just so blessed that you're still out there doing the good work.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it big time.
Thanks, man.